Hello and welcome to Hiblio TV. My guest today has recently been nominated for a National Diversity Award and is recognised in Devon for her outstanding work to support others. Carol is a brave and incredible woman who transitioned over 40 years ago in an era when trans issues weren't understood or accepted. She joins me in the studio today to tell us about her story. Carol, very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Paul.
If you could just tell our viewers a bit about yourself.
Basically, I was born in 1945, just at the end of the war. I struggled in my childhood. I was very confused about who I was. When I was sort of 6.5, I was sent away to a convalescent home for children because I refused to eat. And whilst at the convalescent home, I realised I didn't want to play with the boys. I only wanted to play with the girls. And every time I was made to play with the boys, I went off my food again.
Right.
And so they found it easier to just accommodate me and let me sort of play with the girls, etc. At the time, nobody thought anything about it, but I'm sure these days something like that would have been picked up.
Yeah.
I would hope so. Then at the age of 7, the Christine Jorgensen story broke. Christine Jorgensen was the first transgender woman who underwent surgical reassignment. And I remember distinctly my father saying, perverts like that should be locked away and the key thrown away, which had a profound effect on me. It was the beginning of the intense shame and humiliation of how I felt about myself. I realised at that point in time that this was what I was. So I struggled through...
So you must have found yourself when your father said that, and, you know, that realisation that lots of parents say things and how that sticks.
Yes.
You know, so you must have been almost cowering behind the sofa, almost internally saying, Father, this is how I'm feeling.
Exactly.
And I can't tell you that.
And I can't tell you that because I didn't want to be locked up into a psychiatric institution.
So those very strong images at the very start of this had happened.
Even sort of 65 years on, I still remembered those words vividly. So it had a profound effect on me.
Right.
Growing up, sort of as I was approaching puberty, I was dreading what was going to happen. I considered at the time running away because I'd read an article about castrati in Italy, and I realised that if I was castrated, then my voice wouldn't break, I wouldn't grow hair on my face, etc. So I'd made plans to actually run away to Italy to become.
So you read this article, thought
Yes.
Italy's where I've got to go.
That's right. At the age of 11, so I decided to run away. But on thinking about it, I realised no passport, no money. It was just an impossible dream. And so I sort of gave up on it. Going through grammar school, it was an all-boys school, which was very, very difficult because I had no one I could relate to there. There was no female teachers; they were all male teachers, and so it was very, very difficult. And then at the age of probably 14, I realised I was attracted to boys because I fell in love with this guy in the same class as me.
Yeah.
And again, it's something that I had to hide, something I had to feel shame about. And so all those years in my youth were filled with hurt, shame,
And locking
anger.
stuff away.
Yes, that's right.
A layer and layer and layer of locking stuff away.
Yes, and pretending out to be something I wasn't. It was very, very, very difficult. I left school at the age of 16. At the age of 14, I'd obtained 4 O-levels. I then sat another 7 at the age of 15 and I flunked them all.
Okay.
Purely and simply because this was when all the angst was hitting home. The puberty was sort of roaring, raging inside. I hated who I was becoming. And so depression was setting in. And so I just flunked all the exams.
So if I can just pick you up on that, you mentioned that you flunked the exams and depression was setting in. When you looked in the mirror, did you see someone else inside?
I didn't see... I hated the image that I saw in front of me. I knew that wasn't how I should be.
Okay.
And that image, I just wanted to run away from that image. I wanted to hide away from that person. And so I left school at the age of 16. I got a job in the chemical industry. I'd flunked my physics and chemistry. And so I had to resit them in the November, which I then passed. And the company sent me to night school, and then on to day school, day release.
Yeah.
I got through ONC and HNC, and I found that by studying, I could actually suppress how I was feeling inside. Because the studying was so intense, it didn't give me too much time to actually dwell on all the mixed feelings that were going inside my head. So
keeping yourself occupied, keeping yourself busy.
That's right. It sort of took the edge off how I was feeling.
And beginning to excel.
Yes, because after I got my HNC, the company I work for asked me if I'd like to go to university.
Right.
I jumped at the chance. So off I went on what is called a sandwich course, which was 6 months in industry, 6 months at university. I did that for 3 years, came out with an upper second class honours, and returned back to industry.
Just before we go back to your industry, what was the university experience like for you? Did you meet other people that were transgender?
Oh no, it was very much hidden back in those days. This was sort of 1967.
Right.
I tried to transition in 1962 when I was 17, but that was a complete failure. So, sort of at university, it was completely hidden.
And I remember when we had spoken prior to the programme, you talked about the university and some of the darker days that you had there, and I remember the phone call that you had with this lady.
Yes, that happened sort of slightly later on in my university career, because what had happened is when I left with my sort of upper second class honours,
right,
I went back into industry, and sort of 9 months later the director said, would you like to go and do your PhD?
Right.
So again, I jumped at the chance. Off I tootled back to university, and then it hit me. There was no more study at the end of these 3 years. There was nothing I could hide away from. There was no blanket there to actually, like a sock blanket, like a child has. And so that is when I finally realised that I had to start doing something, otherwise I would perish. I had one suicide attempt by then, and shortly after that there was an organisation started up in Manchester called Nightline for university students who were having difficulties. I carried this piece of paper around in my bag for probably 2 months or so before I actually plucked up the courage to phone this helpline. And very fortunately, I spoke to a woman on the other end of the line, and everything just burst out. It was like a dam breaking, and I spoke to her for 2 hours. I sobbed my eyes out, and she was marvellous. She was very, very helpful. She didn't know much about it, but she said that if I phoned her back the following day, she would have found something out about it and asked for her by name. which I did, and she gave me somebody's address and telephone number. I contacted these people, and that was the start of my journey, because she put me in contact with a counsellor who knew about
so if I'm just going back to this lady, and she's gone off and she's found that information for you, and you talked about that emotional release of all those layers and that vault door opening. How did that feel? Those
it was
2
a
hours?
release. It was a huge release. It was as if enormous weight had been lifted off me. It was like walking out from a dungeon into freedom. I could see. I suppose it's like being in a tunnel with no light at either end of the tunnel.
And suddenly there's a torch on at the end.
That's right, and suddenly you can see this pinprick of light.
Right.
And it's like, and as you walk towards it, it's getting larger. And you know that one day you will emerge into the light.
And this lady almost lit that torch for you.
That's right, yes. And so, yes, I went to counselling. This gentleman and his wife helped me tremendously. They put me in contact with other people who were sort of going through this. And myself and another girl, we started the first group for transgender people in Manchester at the time, in the very early 1970s. And then I went first to my GP, who referred me to the local psychiatric hospital. And it was here I had my first very, very negative experience, because the psychiatrist wanted to put me on electroconvulsive shock therapy program,
Right.
Which I completely rejected. I didn't want any part in that. Because I knew who I was. I didn't want to change inside my mind who I was. Finally, I was accepting myself, and then for someone to say, right, we want to put you back in this dark box, to me that was a complete anathema. It was going against everything I'd fought for.
So what did you do next?
Well, I refused the treatment. He then wanted to actually put me on testosterone treatment to make a man of me.
Okay.
The very antithesis of where I wanted to be. And so I refused that as well. And after around about 9 months, he realised I wasn't getting anywhere. And very, very fortunately, there was a gender identity clinic had opened up in Withington Hospital in Manchester at the time. And so I asked to be referred through to them. I was diagnosed as being transsexual, and they put me on hormone therapy. And that was the start of my release, the start of my journey. But it had unforeseen side effects, in that as my body started to change, I'd finished my PhD at that time. I went back into industry, and I was at a point in my career with this particular company whereby I had to join the company pension scheme.
Okay.
And as part of that, I had to undergo a medical.
Right.
And of course, by this time I'd been sort of 9 months on hormone therapy, and so my body had changed quite significantly. And so during this medical examination, the GP and the doctor had actually looked at me and said, "What's going on here?" Me thinking that doctors, they couldn't reveal anything, which I told them. I confessed to what was happening to me, thinking no more about it. 2 days later, I received a phone call from the managing director asking me to go up to his office. I didn't think anything about it, because this was quite a commonplace thing to happen. You used to go up to the research director's office to discuss what research you were doing, what lines you wanted to do, any thoughts you might be having about research. Okay. And so off I tootled up to the research director's office. And his face was like thunder. And he said, the doctor who examined you has actually explained what's happening to you. And there's no way we will countenance that in this company.
Right.
you can work your 1 month's notice, or I will sack you on the spot. It was as brutal as that. So I decided to go for the 1 month's notice because I had a mortgage, I had lots of other commitments. So off I went, worked the month's notice and left the company.
And when we've talked previously, you talked about your man mode and woman mode.
Yes.
And during your chemical, you know, the days of working in industry, you were in man mode. And was it very different when you went home?
Yes, it was, because I had to obviously go in sort of male mode. But when I got home, I had this other life. I'd started this other life where I was going out as me, making new friends, making new contacts. Some knew my past, some didn't. And so I had this sort of dual life. It was quite strange, quite bizarre. And some very strange...
Sounds like a covert spy. You know, you're in work, dressed as an operative, and then you're going home and being yourself.
That's right. It was quite unusual. But as this continued, I knew that I couldn't keep it up for much longer. And so when they actually told me, you work your month's notice or you quit, I realised that was the time. It was a decision maker for me, because it was then that I realised, yes, I can transition. Yes, I can do it now instead of doing it in 18 months' time after I'd finished all my electrolysis. And so that is what I did. I finished work on the Friday, strangely enough on Halloween evening, so it was the witch was born on that evening. And so I went home, burnt all my male clothes.
And made the decision from there on.
I started living as me.
As a woman, as you.
And it was such tremendous relief. There was no more of this fight inside my head of who I was. I'd started to hate going to work because I had to go in male mode. And it was sort of making me even more sort of depressed and anxious and everything else.
And the bit I wanted to come on to was people watching this may recognise some of the things that you've already mentioned in those early years and during, you know, the university days and so forth, and living.
Everyone's path is different, but there are sort of very common themes that run through it. And one of it is this internal fight, another is the depression, anxiety, and things like of this nature. In this day and age, GPs are far more sympathetic. You can talk to your GP now, and the majority of GPs will be understanding and help you on your journey.
So if someone is watching this broadcast and thinking, actually, I see a lot of Carol in me.
Yes.
So you're saying to have a conversation with the GP?
Yep, or phone our helpline and have a chat with me about how you're feeling. And from there, you can sort of start to explore yourself and become more comfortable with yourself. And once you're feeling comfortable with yourself, then possibly that's the time to actually approach your GP. When you're feeling comfortable with yourself, not when you're feeling anxious, not when you're feeling depressed, when you start to feel more comfortable with how you feel and how you identify.
So Carol, if you can just tell us a bit more about your website.
Well, the website is basically aimed at people who might be discovering themselves for the first time, who are unsure about themselves. It's also for parents who might have suspicions about their child acting slightly differently than what they expect. They can actually go and get a lot of information from the website. We have a helpline. They can contact me via email from the website, or they can actually go on our online forums for help and support. Our telephone support number is 07476 15 1717.
I'm glad you remembered that, because people often sit in the hot seat and then the numbers just go. Is that the helpline 9 till 5 or?
No, the helpline is operational 3 evenings a week, which is Sunday from 6 p.m. until midnight, Monday 6 p.m. until midnight, and Wednesday 6 p.m. until midnight, except the first Wednesday of each month.
Okay, so there's lots of information on your website.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Is.
Thank you for joining us this afternoon, Carol. My thanks to Carol for joining me in the studio today and giving me and our audience a real insight into her life. For more information about Transfigurations, Carol's website, please follow the links at the end of this broadcast. I'm Paul Norris from Hiblio TV, and we thank you for joining us.